For this first recipe, we're going to begin with the slicing technique. For this recipe, you will need 2 onions. I went with a sweet onion and also a yellow onion. We're going to be making caramelized onions, and I feel that having a mixture of the two just works out beautifully. They each have a slightly different characteristic to them, so the dish is a little bit more nuanced than if you just went with one. But if all you have is sweet onions, go for it. If all you have is yellow onions, perfect. No big deal. But we'll begin just by cutting one of the onions. And so, first off, let's talk about the anatomy of the onion. Think of it this way: the stem right here, and the root down here. North Pole, South Pole, or vice versa, whichever you want to go with. But it works out that way really well because then you can see, these lines going across and think of it as, North Pole and South Pole. And these can kind of help you out as far as distancing goes. I mean, they're not perfect. Every onion's gonna be a little different. But also, if you forget how you began to cut, you can notice, okay, I see the way that the onions are layered. So we'll begin with your knife pinch, okay? We're gonna take off the North Pole, and always make sure that you are doing something with like a claw pattern with your fingers, so that way your fingers are not just like exposed out, they're curled under. So we'll begin right here. I'm just gonna take off that, making like a little base. All right, so now we have our South Pole. South Pole is very important. It's the root system. This is what's gonna hold everything together. So in some of the techniques we'll do later, you'll see that I will leave that fully intact. It will help out to make things not just fall apart. But here, I don't need that extra addition, the help from the root system, so I'm gonna get rid of that in the same way that I got rid of this. All right, so then, right down the middle, as you can see. All right. Go ahead and get rid of whatever you want to on the top. It could be that one little layer. If you feel that that next one is not very firm and you wanted it to be, get rid of that. Every onion's different. You get to play around with it, figure out what you want to do. I'm just gonna get rid of that right there. Okay, so again, we can see these lines here. That was going north to south. Most people will think, okay, if I'm going to be cutting slices, I'm just gonna cut this way, and what they'll do is make this. Now, if you had a whole onion together, this is wonderful for making onion rings. But for cooking purposes, that's really not the best way to cut an onion when you're going for slices. The consistency of the onion is a little different. And I'll get into that more in the post because I really don't want to sit here and sound too scientific about it. I mean, this is just things that I've read from other people, and I believe it, and I want to, share that knowledge with all of you. So do your best to remember not to cut along that side, as I think most people really think to do. So instead, we're going to use those lines again, as I talked about, and think about cutting along with them. So we're going for 1/4 inch cuts. You really need a sharp knife for this. Please do not be afraid of having a sharp knife. I promise you, the likelihood of you cutting yourself with a knife is more with a dull one than a sharp one, because a sharp one does all the work for you. Dull ones, you have to press a lot harder. We get our knives sharpened regularly. I have a wonderful little shop right down the road that we love to use. I recommend you look for one as well. So let's go with the cut. So I'm just going straight down, about 1/4 inch. Try to keep your blade straight. Let the blade do the work. As you can see, these are your cuts. A little more uniform. And just keep working your way through it. I was doing this not on camera, I'd probably cut a lot faster, but the last thing I want to do is make a mistake on film, right? So, just take your time. All right, getting down to that last little piece right there. And that's half the onion. So again, for this recipe, we're going to be doing 2 onions. So I'll get working with that. I'm a big fan of having my bench scraper, so that way I don't use the end of my knife. All I do, pick that up, put that there. And if you see some pieces that are a little bit too big for what you're gonna use them for, you can cut them down. I'm not too worried about a couple of those that on the end are a little bit thicker. And then you'll do the same with the other side. So let's just go through this one. Actually, I'm just going to slice this way. Still following that same lines. All right, and that is a sliced onion. We don't need to watch me do a second one. I think you get the points. But those are all pretty consistent 1/4 inch cuts, which means they will cook down properly. And there you have it. I'm gonna cut the second onion off camera and then we'll get to cooking them.